So the million-dollar question: why do people get sick? What is the true cause of disease? Well, Louis Pasteur made the germ theory famous, and he made the germ theory famous probably in about the 1850s, somewhere like that. And the germ theory states that germs cause disease. Now, if the germ theory is correct, surely all we have to do is find something that will kill the germ. Have we got enough things to kill germs, ladies and gentlemen? Have you seen? It's a multi-million dollar industry. It's the pharmaceutical industry, isn't it? In fact, there are two multi-million dollar industries. Actually, there's three now. Number one is the junk food industry. And because of the junk food industry, people aren't working well. That's produced the pharmaceutical industry that comes along trying to fulfill what Louis Pasteur stated, that germs cause disease. But I tell you what, if germs do cause disease and we've got a multi-million dollar industry built on drugs to kill germs, why aren't people getting better? In fact, are people getting sicker? Mm-hmm. They are. Well, there's another multi-million dollar industry born out of the frustrations from people who aren't getting better from the drugs, and that is the vitamin industry. Am I right? Is it working? I would like to suggest to you that it is not working. And there's a very famous nurse called Florence Nightingale. She knew the true cause of disease, and I'll show you why in a minute. And when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory, who was a contemporary at her time, she said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And she said, and anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Whew. Well, what did Florence Nightingale believe? Well, Florence Nightingale was born to very wealthy parents. She was educated, which was very unusual for a woman of her day, and she wanted to help people. And so at the ripe old age of about 28, she was that age before her father let her start to work in institutions for wealthy young women who were fainting because their corsets were too tight, or etc., etc. She said in her book the only time she was happy when she had parcels of food and she was going to the little villages to help the poor. Her sister Parthe loved the wealthy life, loved the parties, sewing a fine seam and painting watercolours, but Florence Nightingale said it drew no satisfaction to her. So by the time she was about 33, she'd gained a little bit of experience, well actually quite a bit of experience in the line of nursing. She was very interested in how the institutions ran, and so she put in a lot of procedures, so that was basically her role. Well, it was about 1856 and the Crimean War was happening, and the message got back to the British government that the French soldiers were being better looked after than the British soldiers. It's usually political, isn't it? And so the British government asked Florence to take 35 nurses to Sukhati, which was the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. When she got there, the conditions were appalling. The hospital was ex-army Turkish barracks. The plumbing didn't work. There was raw sewage in the corridors. The conditions were appalling, and the death rate in that hospital was 50%. You had a better chance on the battlefront than you had in that hospital. But when she came in, the doctor said, we don't need you, and you're not coming in here. They sent her to the kitchen. She went to the kitchen. It was filthy. There were huge big pots of water with a bit of rotten meat in it. There was the food. Because the plumbing wasn't working, 30 men were going to one chamber pot. The stench was horrific. She found one man who'd been there 2 weeks and hadn't been attended. They were just overflowing with wounded. So Florence Nightingale did what she could, scrub the kitchen, got the kitchen working. Meanwhile, she telegrammed her father. She said, I want a shipload of clean linen, clean bedclothes, clean mattresses, clean bandages, and a cook. As you will see as we go through the lecture this morning, body cannot heal without nourishment. It's like asking a builder to build a house but not providing the building material. 2.5 weeks later, another shipload of wounded came in. The hospital was already at its limits, so the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, all right, you can come in. They hated her. Do you know she made them wash their hands between operations? The first thing Florence did was she got her nurses to start scrubbing and cleaning, opening the windows. She got men to assess the plumbing to see, if you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up, aren't you? Within, I think it was about October she arrived, November 1856. By 1857, I think it was about April, the death rate had gone down to 10%. Within a full 6 months, the death rate was 2%. Wow. When she went back to England, she was hailed as a heroine. When she found that was going to happen, she slipped down the back gangplank and went home. She said, "I'm not a heroine." She said, "All I did was increase the hygiene, the sanitation, and the nutrition." She knew germs don't cause disease. She said germs are the result of unhealthful conditions. She made that hospital such that there was nowhere for them to live. Their role on the planet is to clean up the place. You see that? In fact, on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur refuted his theory. This is what he said. I have about 4 books where his deathbed confession is quoted. Bernard was right. Who's Bernard? Claude Bernard was a contemporary at the time of Pasteur. Claude Bernard believed it was not germs, it was the condition of the body. And this is what Pasteur said on his deathbed. Bernard was right. The microbe is nothing. The organism is everything. And isn't that true? It is not the microbe, it's the environment. Florence Nightingale, she didn't come in with drugs to kill every microbe. She just cleaned up the environment so they weren't there anymore. Just basic common sense, isn't it? So the germ theory's been very popular, and it still is to some extent. But another theory has almost surpassed it. They're actually equal. I call them the 2 Gs. 1953, headlines in the newspaper, "Secret of life has been discovered." Watson and Crick's had been able to unravel the DNA. And from that time on, the second G came in to be blamed as the cause of all disease. It's the gene. Is it the germ or is it the gene? Notice with both theories, it takes away all responsibility on the human being for what is happening in them. So they are very convenient theories. You see, if the human body was designed to heal itself, and if it's not healing itself, one must ask this. This little 3-letter word will remain here all week. And it's the law of action and reaction. It's Newton's 3rd law of motion. To every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. If a body is not healing when it's given certain conditions, one has to put the detective hat on and ask, why? Why is this happening and why isn't it healing? And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. If it's not working, change the conditions until the body says, yeah, this works. And as I spoke about last night, you're the doctor. If the body says, I like this, what's it saying? Yeah, do this. Let's have a look at the gene. Here is the cell. And the cell must be looked at because that's what we are. We're just a bunch of cells. We have hair cells, eye cells, tissue cells, bone cells, skin cells, liver cells, kidney cells. And most of the cells are much the same, and they run much the same. Yesterday in your live blood analysis, you saw the size of the cell. 250 million red blood cells on 1 drop of blood. Now, when I'm speaking about the cell, I'm not speaking about the red blood cell because the red blood cell's a little different. It doesn't have a nucleus. You see, it's in the nucleus that the DNA is. The red blood cell is the carrier, and it's the carrier of nourishment taking it to these cells so that they've got oxygen, so they've got water, so that they have got nourishment, so the waste can be taken away. So Watson and Crick's in 1953 were able to unravel this DNA. If you pull that DNA out, it's 2 meters long. Wow. Let's have a look at the DNA unravelled. 23 chromosomes from my mother. 23 chromosomes from my father. The information is all stored up in the DNA on how to make a new body. And did you know we're constantly being remade? Our eye cells are remade every 2 to 3 days. That's why people that have eye operations, they recover very, very quickly. The next cell that recovers quick is the cells that line your gastrointestinal tract. They're remade every 3 to 5 days. Because we're not all made at once, every cell's not remade at once, I think it takes approximately about a year before we've got a new body. Let's have a look at the DNA. The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. And polysaccharides basically means many sugars. And many sugars come from just about everything that we eat. So they're the outward strands. The inside strands are made up of amino acids, and amino acids come from the protein that we eat. The glue that glues the amino acid bands to the outside polysaccharide strands is minerals. And the food that is the highest in minerals is the vegetables. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. He didn't know about the DNA, but he knew that we were made up from what we eat. And you can see by the very structure of the DNA, we're made up from the food that we eat. We're constantly being remade. How are we remade? Well, DNA has all the information on how to remake us. Every cell in the body has all that information, and if you were to put all that information into alphabetical language, it would fill 1,000 books with 1,000 pages and 3,000 letters on each page. That's quite phenomenal, isn't it? All the information, let's say this is a gastrointestinal tract cell, GIT cell, GIT, gastrointestinal tract cell. All the information on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell is in every single DNA of every single cell of the body. So all that information is there. But that gastrointestinal tract cell, it doesn't want to make a new liver cell or a new pancreatic cell. So for reasons that medicine doesn't quite understand, the information is highlighted not on how to make a new liver cell, but how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell. So almost the liver cell information, that's veiled over. So let's look at how a new gastrointestinal tract cell is made. So all the information is in the DNA. It makes a photocopy of it, and it's called RNA. An RNA, with its photocopy of all the information on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract, comes down to the little factory where it's made, called ribosome. Ribosome is the little factory where the new cell is made. And the structure begins, brick upon brick. What are the bricks? Amino acids. What's the glue? Minerals. Brick upon brick, all the information's there, and out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. What about someone with irritable bowel syndrome? Irritable bowel syndrome is irritation of the lining of the colon, small intestines. If someone has irritable bowel syndrome, why aren't they well in a year? Is that a reasonable question? If the body's constantly being remade, why aren't they well in a year? It's a reasonable question, isn't it? Let's have a look at what happens. Information from how to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell is taken down by RNA to ribosome. This person has irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. The information comes through and the new cell is made. Brick upon brick. Oh no, there's a flaw in the pattern. Mutation in the DNA, it's called. Brick upon, oh no, there's another flaw in the information. Something is wrong with the pattern. It's not being made right. Brick upon, oh no, the person is short in a basic amino acid. Maybe it's methionine. That's not made properly. Oh no, they're short in a mineral. Maybe it's magnesium. So that's not made right. And a new irritable bowel syndrome cell is made. There are a lot of health professionals today who are looking at healing from a DNA level Because if you don't get the pattern right, if you don't get the recipe right, it cannot be made. You see that? Cancer is mutations of the DNA. So the first thing we've got to do, obviously, is stop what is causing the damage or the mutations in the DNA and heal that DNA, or the body will not heal. So let's have a look now at what causes damage in DNA. Because as I said previously, if you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. Let's have a look at what causes damage in these messages. Number one is chemicals. Chemicals are called carcinogenic. Carcinogenic means causing cancer, causing mutations in the DNA. I was reading in the Chemical Alliance magazine recently that they're finding babies that learnt to swim, or children that learned to swim as babies in chlorine pools, are having health problems because of the chemicals in the pool. Whenever they try and put fluoride in the water, huge protest comes up. Have you noticed? But they still put it in the water. You know what fluoride is? It's a byproduct from Alco, the aluminium making company. Does fluoride help with teeth? Well, fluorosis is mottled teeth. That's from too much of the fluoride. Fluoride can also damage the DNA. It can also damage brain cells. It can damage kidney cells. And the fact is, if fluoride touches the tooth, it can actually strengthen the outer coating. That's about all. How many chemicals were legal 20 years ago that are illegal today? How many are we using today, or some are using today, that will be illegal in another 10 years? Chemicals cause cancer. Chemicals cause mutation of the DNA. We don't have any say over the neighbour, but we have total say over our home. One of the best things you can do for your family is make a decision to have a chemical-free home. And as we go through these lectures, I'll show you very effective and much cheaper alternatives. Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods, how do they cause mutations in the DNA? Basically, that's how it created. Two DNA from two different species are spliced together. Let's give you an example. The DNA from a tomato and the DNA from an Atlantic salmon, they splice together to create a tomato that will grow in the snow, but it actually doesn't happen. There's this huge grey area of all these other things that happen that they actually don't understand. And when a human being eats genetically modified food, and that food's broken down to these simple structures, especially amino acids, the body says, "Who are you? I don't recognise you." And if there's no other amino acids, they have to use them for the building of the DNA, and that causes flaws. Causes mutations in the DNA. Eating genetically modified foods causes cancer because it actually puts into the body basic ingredients that the body does not know how to use. Number 3, excess in electromagnetic fields. You've probably heard about cows grazing under those huge big electrical towers, and they have stillborns, they have, their offspring are born with problems. We all have electromagnetic fields in our body. We're electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in our body. It's the excess that causes the problem. Some of the biggest dangers that are happening with people today is exposing their eyes, because your eyes are an extension of your brain, to the electromagnetic field excess, especially late at night. This is game stations, your computer, TV. Now we have computers and we have mobile phones and they're very, very handy, but it's the excess that the problem is. I mean, teenage suicide is just, it's so big now, it doesn't even reach the newspaper. I think it's got a lot to do with kids aren't sleeping when their brains recharge and they're having this exposure, this electromagnetic field excess. If you have a television in your room, make sure it's turned off at the point. Don't charge your iPhones, your Bluetooths in your bedroom. We spend a third of our life in that room. So be very cautious as to what's in that room when you're sleeping. Charge them in the bathroom, charge them in another room. If you have a television, turn it off. If you have an electric clock, say you're sleeping here and it's right there on the table, put it over to the other side of the table. You know, you'll reduce the electromagnetic field excess by about 3/4 just by moving it another foot away. So be very mindful of this. This is a very big thing today in our technological society. And of course, in that you've also got microwaves. There's some countries in Europe today, they're banned. When they cook food, the amino acid that breaks down from the food that's cooked in their body does not recognise. It's in a structure that it doesn't understand, so it cannot remake the DNA effectively. Number 4, and this may surprise you, 92% science is showing today of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency. How could we have a mineral deficiency? Well, in many American homes, it's starting to happen a little bit in Australia, there are no kitchens. It's just freezer to microwave to rubbish bin. When I lived in the Bronx in 2004 and I'd walk every morning, I could never walk along the streets where the garbage delivery was about to be collected because the garbage took up almost the whole of the footpath. And the garbage had been collected actually 3 days before. See, when you've got trays that are going from freezer to microwave to rubbish bin, you got this much rubbish. Because we burn our papers, because we use a lot of natural food and compost all what we don't use in our vegetables, I think I have a tiny little bag about this much once a week. So where's the mineral deficiency coming from? Number 1, it's the way agriculture happens in Australia today. We had a wheat farmer here, his wife, and she said majority of wheat in Australia is grown with superphosphate. Superphosphate in the soil kills the microorganisms. When the microorganisms are killed in the soil, they're the ones that release the minerals out of the soil and into the plant. Superphosphate creates show ponies of vegetables. Looks good, doesn't taste very good. Have you ever tasted an apple off a tree? Flavour's intense. You know what you're tasting? Minerals. Did you taste that cucumber yesterday? Been picked this morning, that morning. Incredible taste. You're tasting minerals. When you taste an apple out of Woolies maybe, or no taste, have you ever done it? I've done it. You eat it and you think, if I had a blindfold on, I wouldn't even know what I was eating. No minerals. It's because of the way that they're grown. And then they're picked too early. Then they're stored for too long. And then often they're cooked too long. And then all the minerals that are there left go in the water and the water's thrown away. But a lot of Aussies are fast food. It's just a fast society. No time to cook, no time to prepare, just fast food, fast food. That's why so many Aussies are mineral deficient. If minerals provides the glue to glue everything together, do you know it's minerals that can be responsible for start healing or bridging the gap in the DNA damage? What else can cause it? Stimulants. Some of Australians' darlings do it. What are some of Australia's darlings? Let's do a little list here. Sugar, refined sugar. How does refined sugar cause DNA damage? It overworks the pancreas. And when the pancreas gets overworked, that actually gives a message to the gene to damage the pancreatic gene so that the children are born with weakened pancreases. So they're the children that are getting hyperactive. They're the children that are getting diabetes when they're 7. They've been born with a damaged gene because the parents and the parents before them overdid the sugar. Most people are overdoing it, not even aware of the danger. You can buy 2 books on sugar, 2 that I know of. One's called Sweet Poison. The other one's called Sugar Blues, because sugar causes the blues. There was a newspaper article not recently that was claiming that sugar was a poison. Caffeine. When I was a little girl, my parents drank tea. But what's the number one favourite drink in Aussie today? Is the caffeine. How does caffeine cause DNA damage? It interferes with the neurotransmitters, and when the neurotransmitters in the brain are constantly being interfered with, that affects the DNA. So that when those parents give birth to children, the DNA is damaged. Where does the weakness go? The weakness goes to brain function. Alcohol. People that drink before they have birth to babies, they give a defective DNA to their babies that have a tendency to addiction to alcohol. And brain damage. Tobacco. Notice I'm choosing the very socially acceptable ones. Tobacco. Parents that smoke give birth to children with less alveoli in the lungs. They give birth to children that have damage in the little honeycomb that holds all that alveoli together. So children born to smoking parents can actually get emphysema without ever having smoked. Wow. Drugs. This is a big one today. When I was young, you could get drugs in North Sydney, in Sydney for a price. Every school has them. Even primary schools are selling marijuana now. And it affects the DNA. It affects the DNA of the person that's doing it, so they give birth to children that have defective DNAs towards it. I used to think marijuana was all right. I used to go to nursing mother meetings and say they all should be on marijuana. This is when I was 25. Because we thought it's much better than alcohol. But you know, I've seen too many casualties. My girlfriend, her two eldest children are dead now. One got drug-induced psychosis. The other one went on to heavy drugs and overdose. Scary stuff. This is more dangerous than most people realise. Number 6, fungus. When we were lazing in the creek yesterday, I think, Rebecca, you made the comment on the algae and the lichen, the relationship that they have. What happens is that the algae can take over. You see, fungus is responsible for more mutations in the plant kingdom than any other thing. Fungus can cause mutations in human beings as well. There are some creatures, I think there's a snail, and the fungus can come in and take over that snail and reproduce itself through the snail. And they know when it does, because instead of those things that come out being an inch long, they're 2 inches long and they're psychedelic technicolor. That's when they know that the fungus is now reproducing itself through the snail. David Attenborough, he's got a very interesting show on ants. And there's a colony of ants that grow fungus under the ground, and they tend it. Because the waste that it gives off, they roll up into little balls, and that's their food. But they can only have an ant tending the fungus plant for no more than half an hour. Otherwise, the fungus takes over the ant. Isn't that interesting? So fungus can cause mutations in the DNA. Let's have a look at that. Microorganisms. Microorganisms are microscopic. Microscopic meaning you can only see them under a microscope. Organisms mean that they're living things. In looking at the fungus aspect, we're also going to look at the germ theory, because they're all microorganisms. There's a very famous scientist, he's a 6 times professor, Antoine Beauchamp. He was a contemporary at the time of Pasteur. Most people have never heard of him. Why have we heard of Pasteur? Because he was a socialite and he got a lot of media attention, and everyone liked his theory because he said, you poor thing, when you get sick, it's not you, it's the germ that has jumped on you. Beauchamp was not popular because he said microorganisms, they're in every cell of the body. There are 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells. And when the body's running well, they contribute to the proper running of the cell. But whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. They are able to turn into something that we call the cleanup team. A microbiologist said to me, "Oh, we call them the garbage collectors." What's their name? Their name is bacteria. That's their role on the planet. That's what they do. And the more cell damage, the more waste, the more bacteria. With the floods that happened in Queensland last year, what was the biggest concern? I said on the television, if you've got a cut or a graze, don't go in the water, because what was the water alive with? Lots of this. Why? Because there was so much cell damage. There was plant death, there was animal bird death, and they were all floating in the water. So there's a lot of bacteria. As the environment changes, the bacteria now evolves into yeast fungus. We call this the exterminators. That's their role. That's what fungus are. As the environment changes, the yeast and fungus, they now evolve into the undertakers. And what do undertakers do? They take away the dead things. What's their name? Mould. That's what mould's role is on the planet. And not long after the mould stage, the matter is now brought back to dust. What I have drawn for you here is the cycle of life. It's the carbon cycle. There's a basic law of science that states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. These are the performers in the cycle of life. These are the players in the cycle of life. That's their role. Florence Nightingale understood this very clearly. Antoine Beauchamp understood it very clearly. And both of them, amongst with also Claude Bernard, when they heard of Pasteur's theory, they just thought, this guy's crazy. This theory defies common sense. As a gardener, I have 3 compost bins. Why do I have 3? One I'm adding to, one is sitting, and one I'm taking from. What's happening in the one that I'm adding to? I'm putting all my breakdown from my food in there. And the little microorganisms that were once part of building up carrot, now that the damage has happened in death of the carrot, now it starts to break down the carrot. The one that's sitting, I'm letting these microorganisms do their job. But in my garden, I had help. It's called worms. And then the compost bin I'm taking from, I put the fork into it one day, it all breaks apart like beautiful dirt. All the matter has now been brought back to dust. Then I put that dust into my garden. What sort of a garden have I got when I have got compost in my garden? Amazing. People used to say to me, why doesn't anything eat your cabbages? I said, I don't know. Nothing does. And there are little moths everywhere. Do you know a healthy, strong plant, body, nothing eats it. Have you noticed? What you see in the garden is what you'll see in human beings. One time, Antoine Beauchamp took a dead cat, wrapped it up in an airtight container and let it sit for 4 months. After 4 months, he came back, opened it, airtight container. What did he find? Dust, maybe a few bones. Takes a bit longer. What brought cat back to dust? The microorganisms that were part of living, running cat upon cell damage, and death is the ultimate cell damage, took their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on, and became the clean-up team. Evolved into the exterminators, down to the undertakers. So by the time Antoine Beauchamp opened his container, it was just dust. With great excitement, he took the dust, put it under his microscope. What did he see? In the dust, it was alive with microorganisms. They'd finished their role. Now they were waiting for their next role. You know, there's no waste in nature. If something dies, does it stay there? No, it all breaks down and goes back into dust. What does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. He's referring to what's going to happen to that dead body in the coffin. It's going to come back to dust. Do you know what this means, ladies and gentlemen? The microorganisms that were part of running ancestors of ours are still here. Nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. So when I put my compost, that is now totally back to dust, earth, and I put it in my garden, what am I doing? Let's have a look. Here's plant. Here are the roots of plant. I put my compost in. What am I putting into the garden? I'm putting probably millions of microorganisms. Now they play another role. Now they break down the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil and make them available for the roots of the plant. But not only that, they protect the plant from harmful pathogens. And the plant loves those microorganisms. The plant knows the health of the plant is dependent on them. So 50% of the fuel that the plant makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to feed those microorganisms. It's almost like, please stay, I'll feed you. I'll give you something nice to eat. Beautiful illustration of giving and receiving. That's why organically grown fruit and vegetables has a far higher nutrient content because of the microorganisms in the soil that break down the minerals and the heavy metals in the soil and make them available for the roots of the plant. So my cabbages, my cauliflower was so high in nutrients because of the microorganisms that were in my soil, nothing ate my plants. A similar thing happens in our gut. In our gut, in our small intestine, it's lined with little things that look just like the roots of a plant. And do you know they play a similar role to the roots of a plant? They're called villi. And instead of a green blood network going over it, as in the roots, it's red. Last night we talked about how similar chlorophyll is to human blood. In the gastrointestinal tract, this is where the food comes down, there are little microorganisms. Did you know that the microorganisms in our gut, they're the largest amount of microorganisms in the whole of the body? Here they are. Their name is, the most common are Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. I was giving a lecture in Fiji and they started laughing. They said, "Can you speak English?" Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. They're the two main ones. They're the two permanent ones that live in the gastrointestinal tract. Do you know they play a similar role as do the ones in the soil? They break down some of the nutrients in the foods and make them available for your roots, your villi. Enzymes in the mouth break down starch. Enzymes in the stomach break down proteins. Enzymes in the small intestine break down the final breakdown of starch, protein and fat. So what do the Lactobacillus acidophilus Bifidobacterium do? They release something out of the food that those other enzymes don't. They release the B vitamins. Wow. That's why in your cultured foods, like your sourdough bread, like your yogurt, like your sauerkraut, they're high in B vitamins because that's what these healthy bacteria do. How important are B vitamins? Well, we have to magnify inside the cell again. Inside the cell, did you know there's a whole city inside that cell? Inside the cell, there are little furnaces, maybe 2 or 3, where the glucose and the oxygen are burnt as fuel. Let's magnify into that little furnace, into the little energy cycle. It's called the Krebs cycle. So the glucose goes in, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, approximately 9 little chemical reactions before the energy comes out. We've got 100 trillion cells in the body. So that's the magnification we're looking at. Every single one of those chemical reactions requires a B vitamin. Okay, let's put all this into perspective. Let's say someone's low in Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidobacterium. They won't be getting their B vitamins. And if they're not getting their B vitamins, the energy cycle in their cell isn't going to be running efficiently. And what are their energy levels going to be like? It's the most common complaint that I get from people. I've just got no energy. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, we should leap out of bed in the morning, whether we're 9 or 90. If you don't, put the detective hat on. Why not? Is it because you're low in B vitamins? Why are you low in B vitamins? Oh, is it because you're low in Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidobacterium? Why are you low in B vitamins? I mean, Lactobacillus acidophilus. Well, let me tell you some of the things that wipe them out. Refined sugar does a great job. Caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, they all do a very great job. But there's one drug that's the best at wiping these guys out, and it's antibiotics. One lady said to me, oh, well, I get a tick for all that. Rudyard Kipling wrote a whole poem on it. I won't give you the whole poem, but I'll give you the first stanza. I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Take your 6 trusty serving men with you everywhere you go. And if the specialist gets impatient at your questions, arise, politely excuse yourself, leave, and don't pay the bill. Because you're employing him. Would you pay the plumber if he didn't plumb his plumbing properly? We, the consumer, have a lot of power, more power than we think. Are you starting to see, ladies and gentlemen, that rather than being the enemy, these guys are responsible for the life cycle on planet Earth? They are not the enemy. And if this guy's out of control, the detective hat has to be put on. Why are they out of control? No wonder Florence Nightingale said that Louis Pasteur's theory was the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. She had a remarkable effect in that hospital about 80 years before antibiotics were discovered. Let's pursue antibiotics and look at their role. Let's look at what they are and the effect that they have. And we must look at them because 1% of doctors today are saying that they caused more problems than they ever cured. They're one of the enemy. That's one of the chemical warfare that comes to kill off these nasty guys that are blamed for the cause of disease. Yeah? Let's have a look at an antibiotic. Anti, what does that mean? Against. Biotic, what does biotic mean? Life. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're living organisms, we have to get away from this kill mentality because anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the potential to kill a large organism. And what are we? The large. Where did antibiotics come from? Who discovered them? Alexander Fleming, 1929. Notice this is about 80 years after Florence and Antoine Beauchamp and Claude Bernard. Do you know truth doesn't change? Truth just gets added onto. Truth never contradicts itself. So what truth does with Florence Nightingale is it builds on it. It explains why she got the results she did. It doesn't go against it, does it? You can't deny what she did. Alexander Fleming, 1929. He's growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and they're all dead. And he knew Newton's third law of motion. To every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Why did my bacteria die? He looked around, he looked on the top story, or the story above his room, and there was an open window. And in the open window there's a plate of fruit. And in the plate of fruit there was a mouldy orange. Do you remember this from school days? What does an orange do with mould on it? The mould gives off a spore. What's the spore? The spore is in the dust, but there's something else in that dust. There's a highly toxic gas. a poisonous gas designed to kill off anything that would compete with the mole's food source. It's as if the mole says, this is my orange and no one else is going to get it. What else would try and get the orange? Other yeast, funguses, bacteria. And that dust settled on Alexander's bacteria and killed it. Alexander Fleming called the mould penicillium. Alexander Fleming called the mould waste. Remember, the mould waste is more toxic than the mould. And he called the mould waste penicillic acid. That penicillic acid is the penicillin that we know today. Penicillin has saved the lives of thousands, granted. But we've got a problem today. It's the overuse of the antibiotic and the inability of the physician to ask, why are these guys so out of control? It was antibiotics that set me on the path of natural remedies. My first daughter Emma was 16 months old. She got an earache. Even though I was a back-to-nature hippie lifestyler, I didn't know what to do when the child got sick. And my nurse's training said, I've got to kill whatever's causing this. And everyone said to me, don't play with the ears, she'll go deaf. Do you know medicine is based on fear? Why did I run to the... Because they said she'd go deaf. See that fear thing? 6 weeks later and 4 courses of antibiotics later, Emma's earache came back. But I didn't know what else to do. And the fear of she'll go deaf. As the doctor's writing the 5th course of antibiotics, I don't want this. I'm a back-to-nature hippie lifestyler. I don't want my baby to have drugs. But see the fear that was driving me? She might go deaf. I said to the doctor, will my daughter be on antibiotics for the rest of her life? Am I coming to that conclusion? What's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. He was challenged by my statement. I wonder how long this would have gone on if I hadn't challenged him. I know how long it goes on. One lady said to me 22 courses of antibiotics her baby had in the first year of life. Oh, that hurt. Do you know there's a lot of information coming out in the newspaper saying that guts never recover because you're throwing out that balance. And that balance is necessary. That's ecology. We've got to get a balance of these guys. So the doctor said to me, I'll give you a referral to an ear, nose and throat specialist. The ear, nose and throat specialist looked in Emma's ears, looked in Emma's mouth, said, the child's teething. Give her these drops to keep the eustachian tubes clear. And there was no more earache. So 2 years later, when my next son got an earache, I did not go to the doctor. I decided to, instead of exploring the fear avenue, I explored the faith avenue. And faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I believed that I could overcome my child's earache the same way the 85-year-old lady did when she was a little girl. So I visited her. I was 25, she's 85. I said, what did your mother do when you had an earache as a little girl? She said, oh, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove and wrap it on my ear. I ran home, I steamed up the onion, I put it on James' ear, he fell asleep, he slept for 2 hours, he woke up, happy, no more earache. Wow. I was so impressed. I was 25. And that changed my life. Never again did any of my children. I raised 6 children and then I remarried and I raised another 2. None of them ever have drugs after that and they're all still alive. And stronger and healthy for it. You see, the body is designed to heal itself. We need faith in the body, not fear of all the things that could go wrong. If the body's not healing, you make some adjustments till you start to get some responses. I believe that antibiotics should be kept for last resort, life-saving measures. The human body can cope with 1 or 2 courses in a lifetime. Moment of silence to sink that one in. 1 or 2 courses in a lifetime. My son James went to the doctor recently, his arm swelled up, he put a poultice on it like Mum did and it went down, but there was a little ball there. The doctor said, oh, it's bursitis. take this antibiotic. James said, I've never taken an antibiotic in my life and I'm not about to start. Wow, how rare. He got to 33 years of life. He's just turned 34 with no antibiotic. That's almost unheard of. Went home and rang Mum. I said, joint, try ginger. Well, it's down now. Potato didn't bring it down? We'll look at all that tomorrow night. Let's try ginger. Can you see you try different things? What's the body saying? This is the one I like. And the great thing is there's a whole lot of little things you can do. And if this isn't working, we change it. I raised 8 children. What you did to one, you couldn't do to another. You know, and how you treated one, you couldn't. It's all different. That's why you're the doctor. There's no one like you on planet Earth. No one else like you. Never think you're not special because there's no one like you. What is mould waste? Medicine calls it a mycotoxin. If you want to look up mould in a medical dictionary, look up myco. Not myo. Myo is muscle. Myco. I said to one 4th year med student that came here, I said, have you studied mycology? What's mycology? Mycology is the study of fungus. 4th year med student, on the wards. Nope. Hasn't studied mycology. Medicine has blinkers on. All they look at is that. But by the way, when someone takes an antibiotic, what do they usually get the next week? Thrush, yeah? Because what have they just put into their body? A mould waste. Do you remember I said to you about 1% of doctors today are claiming that antibiotics have caused more problems than they ever cured? And I'm referring to cancer. I have a myriad of books here showing the link between cancer and fungus. This one's called Cancer is a Fungus by Dr. Tullio Simoncini, Italian oncologist that was having phenomenal results with cancer until they took all his qualifications away. Do you know why the pharmaceutical companies hate him? Because he's using something that can't be painted. It's called sodium bicarb. This one's Professor Constantini. He was former head, there's a picture of him. He was former head of the World Health Organization Department of Mycology. What's the Department of Mycology? Studies fungus. After 20 years of independent research, he wanted to publish his books, and the World Health Organization said, we're not going to publish those books, because if medicine acknowledges the fungal link with disease, with cancer, they also have to acknowledge is one of their most popular drugs is actually contributing to it. But what I'd like to just flick through at the back here is I want to show you how much medical research he quotes. There's the index. There are 16 quoted researchers on that page. Wow, he knows his stuff. We've also got another book called The Germ That Causes Cancer by Doug Kaufman, and he works with a Dr. Holland. He does a great job at looking at history and the role of fungus and the researchers that showed the fungus link with disease, even cancer. And over 100 years ago, 112 years ago to be precise, medicine and science agreed that cancer was a fungus. Well, here we have another book called Clinical Mycology. What's mycology? Study of fungus. I just want to read you some of the chapters written by 3 doctors. It says here, fungal disease of bone and joint, fungal disease of the cardiovascular system, fungal meningitis, fungal causing mass lesions of the central nervous system, dermatology, ear, nose and throat, gastrointestinal tract, genitourinary, ophthalmology, respiratory. That covers every single part of the human body. This is a medical textbook showing the fungal link with all disease. Dr. Holland, he was asked, are you saying fungus causes most diseases? He said, no, all diseases. Well, you see, to date, they have documented 1.5 million different yeasts, molds and funguses, and they all give off, some of them 2 or 3 different mould wastes. 1,000 of them are well known to cause disease in human beings. Someone else who's a recent day guy, he's only about 45, this is Dr. Robert Young. And in his book, he showed, very interesting chapter, the lost chapter in the history of biology. What's the lost chapter? It's the role of yeast and fungus. And he quotes some scientific greats who proved this to be true. One was Virginia Livingston Wheeler, Claude Bernard that Pasteur quoted, Gaston Naessens. He also gives information on Antoine Beauchamp, which is very difficult to get any information on him. Interesting books. You're looking at about $2,000 worth of books there. A lot of them out of print, a lot of them hard to get, but there is one you can get in Australia, and it's called the China Study. You may have heard it, called the most comprehensive study on nutrition ever conducted. We'll be showing you a DVD later in the week that interviews Colin Campbell. And I encourage everyone to read the first chapter while you're here. It's a summary of the whole book. But he grew up on a dairy farm, ate a lot of meat, became a doctor, went into research, became a doctor vet, went into research, and he was asked to go to the Philippines where children were dying of liver cancer between 8 and 10 years of age. He had a look and he found the one common denominator was peanut butter. Peanut grows a mould called aspergillus that gives off a mould waste called aflatoxin. And aflatoxin is probably the most carcinogenic substance ever to be tested. This explains why peanuts are banned in Australian schools, aren't they? It's because of the aflatoxin. It's not the peanut, it's the mould waste. You see, 78% of Aussies live in the city, so their food is grown in the country, and it is in storage that the problem arises. You get a cold, frosty morning and a hot, sunny day. What's building up in those silos is moisture, which is actually fruitful ground for these guys to develop. So he found in the Philippines it was the peanut butter. Every jar of peanut butter he tested had aflatoxin. He presumed that the poorer children would be dying and the wealthy children would be living, but the opposite was true. The wealthy children were dying and the poorer children were living, and the only difference was what they were eating. The poorer children were eating the native diet, which was lots of greens, seaweeds, lots of vegetables, a little bit of fish, soy. The wealthy children were eating what Time magazine, they called it the meat-sweet diet. Lots of meat, lots of dairy, lots of sugar, lots of refined. And those children were dying. This confronted Colin Campbell because in med school he was taught, you want protein, you eat meat. You want calcium, you drink milk. And that's what these children were drinking a lot of, but they were dying. He was so confronted by this, he was challenged. And the Philippine doctor working with him started laughing. He said, "I know, it's against everything we're taught." About that time, he was reading an American medical journal. And his attention was taken to a study done on liver cancer, which is what he was looking at in the Philippines. An Indian doctor had done a research on 20 rats. Why do they do research on rats? Because their gastrointestinal tract's very similar to humans. And this may horrify you, but rat milk's the closest milk to human milk. But then we're not going to milk rats. Goats will do. But that's why they do research on rats, because they're very similar to humans and they only live 2 years. So they can see what would happen to a rat in 2 years would happen to a human in 70. So what this Indian doctor did, he injected every single one of these 20 rats with aflatoxin because it causes liver cancer. 10 of the rats, he gave a 20% animal protein diet. That's like meat and dairy every meal. The other 10 rats, he gave a 5% animal protein diet. That would be like meat a couple of times a week, dairy a couple of times. After 2 years, every rat on the 20% animal protein diet was dead or dying from liver cancer. After 2 years, the rats on the 5% animal protein diet had no cancer at all, had nice healthy coats. Now this confirmed what Colin Campbell was finding in the Philippines, but it's actually not what he wanted to hear, so he closed the book. Years later, he did his own research. Never in research do you get 100% versus 0%. Every rat on the 20% animal protein diet, he did hundreds, died of liver cancer. Every rat on the 5% animal protein diet, no cancer. He did another section, 20% vegetable protein, no cancer. So he kept refining it down, down, down. There was something in meat and dairy products that accelerates cancer growth. But again, not in a small amount, only in a large amount. And he showed without doubt that it was this mould waste that was causing the cancers, but he was also looking at what fed it or what stopped it. He said we could switch cancer on and off like a switch. Some of the rats he gave 20% animal protein diet for a year, liver cancer getting out of control, turned the switch off by stopping the animal protein. The liver cancer went away. And he reversed it. 1 year on the vegetable protein, no cancer. Gave the 20% animal protein, cancers came. He said it was just so clear. Not a popular study. What would happen to our meat industry in Australia if that was got out? You see that? So what Louis Pasteur said on his deathbed was absolutely right. It is not the microbe. They're everywhere. They're in the air we breathe. There are more in our body than you would ever believe. There's more in our mouth than people on planet Earth. And they're an important part of the life cycle on planet Earth. The only time the problem arises when ecology is thrown out. The good guys are killed off and then the bad guys get out of control. That's why your oil pulling is such an effective and yet simple pull in bringing back the balance. The simple oil pulling in the morning. So let's round this up. Let's have a look at the two theories. I hope I've totally destroyed them both for you because they are both fear theories. How many people believe that they're sick because of their genes? But what is true is that genetics loads the gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger. Important point. We all have loaded guns in some area or another, but loaded guns are useless unless you pull the trigger. Many people today are sick because of the environment that they're living in. We'll be showing you a DVD on Wednesday night called Is Your House Killing You? We spend a third of our life in bed. How many people are breathing in mould from an old pillow, from an old quilt, from an old mattress? I stayed at a lady's place in Queensland and I was doing meetings in that area and I was staying in a little granny flat. I was very pleased with it. It was all sunny and airy and I was glad there was no carpet. Can you imagine what lives in most carpets? I love mats. You can take that mat out, you can put it in the sun, you can whack it, you can clean underneath. I went to bed that night and I laid down, beautiful sheets. I love cotton sateen sheets. It was all lovely. And I couldn't breathe. And I was tired, so I thought, this is silly. Turned around, I was very stuffy. So I finally got up, took the pillowcase off, and the pillows were dark yellow. And I put my nose up near the pillow. Whoa, they were feather. You know what feathers do? When you sweat in the night, the moisture goes into the feathers. And then the feathers all stick together. And I'm talking about sometimes over months. And all that sticking together, what do you think these little guys start doing? Wonderful ground for them to live in and start manifesting themselves. And the fumes they give off are toxic. Remember, the fumes they give off, the mould waste is more toxic than the mould. How many people are breathing that every night? Your pillows should be aired often. I notice when you buy pillows today, do you notice there's a date on them? They stamp a date. In other words, you really should throw them. So be careful of your pillows. Be careful of your quilts. I love feather quilts. How many people wash their feather quilts? Twice a year. Tell you what, they'll be twice as warm. So just remember, when you sleep every night, you give off a lot of moisture. And what does fungus love to live in? It loves the moisture, it loves the dirt, it loves the dark. That's why when we came here, we chopped down all those trees to get the sun and the air in here. I'm a greenie, I love trees, but have them over there a little bit. Don't let them interfere with the fresh air and the sun getting into your house. That's why that is quite a big one, and I spend a bit of time on that. And your eyes will be open when you watch Is Your House Killing? It was an SBS show on television probably about 18 months ago. There are 7 in the series. And the team come into a house, and because the children are always sick, children are down there, you know, they get it a little bit more when they're down there. The team come in, test the air, and they do the classic statement, you've got to get out of this house. Your house is killing you. So they pack their bags, they've got to leave that day. Then they start pulling boards off, and there's dripping taps and black mould underneath. You should see how they're dressed. They're dressed like they're from outer space. They've got big breathing apparatus, totally covered, because that mould, you can breathe it in. It can get through the pores of your skin. Never touch anything mouldy. Get tongs. Go like this, because you can breathe it in as well. Discard it and get it out immediately. You know, Florence Nightingale knew what she's doing. That's all she did. She cleaned up the house. She just cleaned up the house. Dr. Peter Dingle, he's the guy that does the show. He's got a book too we've got in our bookcase called Is Your Home Making You Sick? His series is Your House Killing You? He said, people don't know how to clean. He said, when you vacuum, you shouldn't be going, vacuum the carpet. It shouldn't be like this. It should be zzz. The slower you go, the deeper it gets. So this one is an important one and found in many, many little areas. And the ramifications of the effect of this fungus are so far-reaching as these books that I've alluded to tell you. But please feel free to access the books and have a look and check out what you've been hearing today. We don't need to worry about genes. They load the gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger. We don't need to worry about the germ, because in the right environment, they're not a problem. When you take away the fear of disease, you can start to step into the faith area of disease. The human body will heal itself if you give it the right conditions. This week, we're going to explore those conditions. And in the next lecture, we're going to have a look at your body's garbage disposal units on how to get rid of the waste. One of your best decisions of your life was to come here, because we're going to do to your bodies what Florence Nightingale did to the hospital in Sukati, cleanse. Clean up the house so there's no way for these guys to live. So please have a break and we'll come back in 5 minutes.